first sign that something was terribly wrong came when the Zalthani battlecruiser Dominion's Edge stopped responding to hails from its fleet command. Captain Vexstar had been monitoring human shipping lanes in the Terran border systems, a routine patrol that the Galactic Coalition Authority had been conducting for the past 6 months, since humanity's stubborn refusal to accept their protection services. The humans had been annoyingly independent, establishing their own trade routes and defense networks without seeking proper authorization from the Coalition. Their colony spread like an infection across previously unclaimed systems, and worse, they had begun forming alliances with minor species that the Coalition preferred to keep under their direct influence. Something had to be done. The ultimatum had been delivered 3 days ago by High Commander Zethmore himself, broadcast directly to every human world and station. Surrender their sovereignty to the Coalition, accept relocation to designated worlds where their industrial capabilities could be properly utilized, or face the consequences. It was the same offer extended to 24 species over the past century, most accepted immediately. The few that resisted were quickly convinced by overwhelming displays of force. Humanity's response had been unusual. Instead of the expected panic, desperate negotiations, or even defiant but ultimately futile military preparation, there had been silence. Complete, absolute silence. Human vessels had simply stopped all communications with Coalition ships. Trade convoys had vanished from established routes. Even their notorious chatter on open frequencies had ceased entirely. "Sir," Lieutenant Kekstal's voice carried an edge of concern as he turned from his sensor station. "I'm detecting some kind of massive energy signature from the Dominion's Edge position. It's not responding to any frequency." Captain Vexstar's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. The Dominion's Edge should have been positioned at the jump point leading into the Sol system, the heart of human space. It was part of a 3-ship patrol meant to monitor human military movements before the Coalition's main fleet arrived for the enforcement phase. Energy signature? Vexstar clicked his mandibles in thought. What kind of energy? Weapons discharge? Engine overload? I don't know, sir. The readings don't match any known technology in our databases. It's almost like Kekstal hesitated, his translated voice wavering, like space itself is being twisted somehow. Before Vexstar could respond, his communications officer suddenly stiffened. "Captain!" Emergency transmission from Coalition High Command. Put it through. High Commander Zethmore's image materialized on the main display, but something was wrong. The usually composed Althari commander's skin had shifted to the deep purple that indicated extreme agitation, and his gill slits were fluttering rapidly. "All Coalition vessels are to immediately withdraw from human space and report to Rally Point 7, Zethmore commanded without preamble. "This is a priority Alpha directive. Do not engage any human vessels. Do not approach any human installations. Withdraw immediately." "High Commander," Vexstar began. "What about the enforcement operation? The humans haven't responded to our ultimatum and—" "The humans have responded, Captain." Zethmore's voice carried a tone Vexstar had never heard from the legendary commander before. "Fear. They've responded in ways we didn't think were possible." The transmission cut off, leaving Vexstar staring at a blank screen. In 40 years of service to the Coalition, he had never received a withdrawal order without explanation, especially not from Zethmore, who had led successful subjugation campaigns against the Korthax Empire and the hegemony of Gathered Suns. "Sir?" Kekstal's voice was barely above a whisper. "The energy signature from the Dominion's Edge, it's gone." "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" "I mean, the ship is gone, sir. The energy signature has faded, and there's no trace of the Dominion's Edge on any sensor array. No debris, no distress beacon, no residual radiation signature. It's as if it was never there." Vexstar felt his blood chill. The Dominion's Edge was a Vanguard-class battlecruiser, one of the Coalition's most advanced warships. It carried a crew of 1,200 and enough firepower to level a moon. "Ships like that didn't just vanish. Full scan of the area," he ordered. "Use every sensor we have. I want to know what happened to that ship." As his crew worked frantically at their stations, Vexstar tried to process what he was seeing. The strategic situation had been clear just hours ago. The Coalition had numerical superiority, technological advantage, and centuries of experience in bringing uncooperative species into line. Humanity's forces were impressive for such a young spacefaring civilization, but they were scattered across dozens of systems and couldn't possibly match the concentrated might of the Coalition's enforcement fleet. "Captain," his navigation officer called out, "we're receiving updated orders. All ships are to jump immediately to Rally Point 7. no exceptions. What about the search for the Dominion's edge? The orders specifically state that no coalition vessel is to remain in human space for any reason. We're to leave immediately or face court-martial. Vextar had commanded ships through 3 wars and dozens of smaller conflicts. He understood military hierarchy and the importance of following orders, but he also understood that the coalition didn't abandon its own forces without overwhelming justification. Sir, we're detecting multiple human vessels approaching from the direction of Earth, Keckstyle reported. They're not broadcasting any identification signals, and their design doesn't match any ships in our database. On the tactical display, 12 sleek vessels emerged from what appeared to be empty space. They moved with a fluid grace that seemed to defy physics, their hulls rippling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. They weren't approaching aggressively, but something about their movement suggested they could change that status in milliseconds. Are they targeting us? Vextar asked. No, sir, but... Keckstyle paused, manipulating his controls with increasing desperation. I can't get a weapons lock on them. Our targeting systems can't seem to fix on their position. It's as if they're existing in multiple locations simultaneously. One of the human ships moved closer, and Vextar could see that its hull wasn't solid metal, but something that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. Impossible geometries played across its surface, creating patterns that made his eyes water. Then it spoke. Not through normal communication channels, but directly into every mind on the bridge. The voice was calm, almost gentle, but carried an undertone that suggested infinite depth and patient lethality. Coalition vessel, the voice said. And somehow Vextar knew it was speaking in perfect Zelthani, despite being transmitted telepathically. You are in violation of the new territorial boundaries established by the Terran Collective. You have 30 seconds to begin your departure from this system. New territorial boundaries? Vextar managed to say aloud. By whose authority? By the authority of those who no longer ask permission, the voice replied. You were given an opportunity to coexist peacefully. That opportunity has expired. You now exist at our discretion. Through the viewports, Vextar could see stars beginning to dim in certain directions, as if something massive was blocking their light. But space-based sensors showed nothing in those areas. Just the strange energy distortions that seemed to be spreading throughout the local region. 20 seconds, the voice continued. We strongly recommend you comply. The Dominion's Edge chose not to comply. What did you do to them? Vextar demanded. We removed them from the equation, came the simple reply. Just as we have done with the Coalition's primary battle fleet at Nexus Station, their supply depots in the Korthax sector, and their command facilities on 17 worlds across the southern spiral. The Coalition's military capacity has been reduced by approximately 67% in the last 4 hours. The words hit Vextar like a physical blow. Nexus Station was the Coalition's primary military stronghold, protected by 3 separate fleets and considered impregnable. The supply depots in Korthax were scattered across 12 systems and defended by automated platforms that could destroy any approaching force. The command facilities were located on the most heavily defended worlds in Coalition space. Impossible, he whispered. 10 seconds. We suggest you focus on what is possible rather than what you believe to be impossible. Vextar didn't need to give the order. His navigation officer had already begun the jump sequence, and within seconds, the Coalition patrol ship vanished into hyperspace, leaving the mysterious human vessels alone in the void. 300 light-years away, High Commander Zethmore stood in the emergency command center that had been hastily established on Corvani Prime after the complete destruction of Coalition Central Command. Reports were streaming in from across their territory, each one more impossible than the last. The hegemony of Gathered Suns, the Coalition's most powerful military ally, had simply ceased to exist sometime in the last 6 hours. Not their fleets, their entire civilization. Every world, every station, every ship. All 17 billion souls had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only empty space where their star systems had been. The Korthax Empire's ruling council had been found dead in their sealed council chamber, with no sign of how anyone could have reached them through the layers of security and the thousands of light-years of space between their world and the nearest human colony. According to forensic investigators, they had all died at exactly the same moment, despite being spread across a chamber the size of an aircraft hangar. Most terrifying of all were the reports from Coalition member species who had received visits from human representatives. Not threats or ultimatums, but simple statements of fact, delivered with the calm courtesy that humans seemed to apply to everything they did. Your alliance with the Coalition has been dissolved, the humans had told the Viridian Assembly. Your species has been deemed non-hostile and will be allowed to continue your civilization unmolested. Your former allies have been removed from the equation. We suggest you focus on peaceful development and avoid future entanglements with hostile military organizations. Similar messages had been delivered to a dozen other species, all within the same 6-hour window. The coordination required was staggering, the intelligence gathering even more so. Somehow, humanity had mapped every aspect of coalition power structure, identified every ally and enemy, and then systematically dismantled their opposition while offering protection to neutral parties. Sir, his aide approached with visible reluctance, we're receiving a communication from Earth. Zethmore's gill slits sealed completely, a reflex reaction to extreme stress. Put it through. The holographic display activated, showing a human female in what appeared to be a simple military uniform. She was seated at a plain desk with no decorations or displays of power. Behind her, a window showed the blue curve of Earth against the black of space. Everything about her appearance suggested normalcy, rationality, and complete confidence. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Collective Defense Force, she said without preamble. High Commander Zethmore, you delivered an ultimatum to my species 3 days ago. This is our response. What have you done? Zethmore managed to ask. We have removed the threats to our continued existence and the existence of our allies, Chen replied calmly. The Coalition's military capacity has been eliminated. Your primary leadership has been eliminated. Your most aggressive member species have been eliminated. Your supply lines, command structures, and strategic installations have been eliminated. You're talking about the deaths of trillions of sentient beings. No, Chen corrected. I'm talking about the removal of entities that chose to threaten the existence of our species. They were given the opportunity to coexist peacefully. They chose aggression. We have responded accordingly. Zethmore felt his world tilting around him. The Coalition had been the dominant galactic power for over 2,000 years. They had subjugated or destroyed every species that had challenged their authority. The idea that a single species, one that had only achieved faster-than-light travel less than a century ago, could dismantle their entire civilization in a matter of hours was beyond comprehension. The remaining Coalition member species had been categorized as non-hostile and will be allowed to continue their development. Chen continued. However, any attempt to reconstitute the Coalition's military authority or to threaten human interests will result in the immediate removal of the responsible parties. This is not a negotiation or an ultimatum. This is simply information you need to understand your new situation. You can't destroy entire civilizations because they oppose you. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested depths that Zethmore didn't want to explore. High Commander, your coalition has destroyed or enslaved 43 species over the past millennium. You have strip-mined entire star systems, relocated billions of sentients to labor camps, and eliminated anyone who opposed your authority. The difference between us is not our methods, it's our efficiency. The transmission ended, leaving Zethmore staring at a blank display. Around him, his staff worked frantically to assess the damage and determine what remained of their once mighty empire. But Zethmore already knew the answer. Nothing remained. Humanity had taken apart the Coalition like a technician disassembling a malfunctioning machine, removing each component with surgical precision until only scattered, harmless pieces remained. And they had done it all in less than 6 hours. In the depths of space, Captain Vextar's ship emerged from hyperspace at Rally Point 7 to find chaos. Hundreds of Coalition vessels were gathered in the system, but instead of the organized fleet assembly he expected, he found ships fleeing in all directions while frantic communications filled every channel. All ships, this is Admiral Korthoven of the 3rd Fleet, came a transmission on the emergency frequency. Rally Point 7 has been compromised. Unknown forces have begun systematic elimination of all Coalition assets in this system. All vessels are ordered to disperse and seek independent shelter. Through his viewports, Vextar could see the massive orbital stations that had served as the Coalition's secondary command center. They were dissolving. Not exploding or burning, but simply coming apart at the molecular level, their matter dissipating into space like smoke in a breeze. Sir, Kextal's voice was barely a whisper. I'm detecting the same energy signatures we saw near Earth. They're everywhere. On the sensor display, space itself seemed to be rippling around the fleeing Coalition ships. Some vessels simply vanished mid-flight. Others found their engines failing, as the fundamental forces holding their technology together apparently decided to stop working. A few managed to jump to hyperspace, but even then, Vextar could see the characteristic distortions that suggested something was following them into that supposedly safe dimension. Set course for the outer rim, Vextar ordered. Maximum speed. We need to get as far from Coalition space as possible.
Sir, where are we going?
Vexstar looked at the tactical display showing the complete disintegration of the most powerful military force the galaxy had known. Then at the peaceful blue dot of Earth visible on the long-range sensors. We're going to find somewhere very quiet and hope the humans never notice we exist. As his ship fled into the darkness between stars, Vexstar couldn't shake the image of Admiral Chen's calm expression as she explained humanity's new position in galactic affairs. There had been no anger in her voice, no satisfaction or bloodlust. Just the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing a problem that had been solved. That, more than anything else, terrified him. The humans hadn't conquered the Coalition through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They had simply decided that the Coalition was incompatible with their continued existence and then proceeded to make the necessary adjustments to reality. And they had done it all with the casual efficiency of gardeners removing weeds from their lawn. Ambassador Lyrithes had seen the rise and fall of 6 different galactic governments during her 3-century career in diplomatic service. She had negotiated treaties that prevented wars, mediated conflicts that could have consumed entire star clusters, and witnessed the birth of civilizations that would go on to shape galactic politics for millennia. Nothing in her vast experience had prepared her for the silence that now filled the Galactic Assembly Chamber. The great amphitheater that could house representatives from over 2,000 species now held fewer than 300 souls. Empty platforms stretched in all directions, their quantum translation systems dark and unused. The Coalition had represented nearly 60% of known galactic civilization, and in the span of a single day, they had simply ceased to exist. The chair recognizes Ambassador Cravel of the Tanathi Republic, Lyrathis announced, her voice echoing strangely in the vast empty space. The insectoid diplomat rose on his platform, his translation matrix flickering with what appeared to be either faulty equipment or extreme nervousness. Honored colleagues, Cravel began, we have gathered to address the situation that has developed regarding the human species and the recent events involving the Galactic Coalition Authority. A ripple of movement passed through the sparse gathering. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably, others activated privacy shields around their platforms, and a few simply left their positions entirely. The word human had taken on an almost supernatural weight in the past week. The Tanathi Republic formally requests information regarding the current status of Coalition member species and their territories, Cravel continued. Our long-range sensors indicate massive gravitational anomalies in previously occupied systems, and our trade vessels report finding empty space where established colonies once existed.
From the Viridian platform, Ambassador Sektar activated his communication array.
The Viridian Assembly can confirm that all former Coalition territories now register as uninhabited space. Our deep space monitoring stations recorded simultaneous collapse of quantum signatures across 17 sectors. The energy release was considerable. Lyrathis had seen the classified reports herself. Considerable was an understatement that bordered on comedy. The energy signatures had been detectable from the galactic core, the equivalent of thousands of stars going supernova simultaneously, but without any of the accompanying radiation or debris that such events should have produced. Space itself had simply been edited. Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Theknos of the Crystal Territories, we should address the more pressing question of what the humans expect from the rest of us. The chamber fell silent again. It was the question everyone wanted to ask, but no one dared voice. Humanity had demonstrated capabilities that redefined what was considered possible, and they had done so with a methodical efficiency that suggested this was merely a small sample of their true potential. The Terran Collective has made no demands on any non-coalition species, Lyrathis stated carefully. Their communications have been limited to simple notifications regarding territorial boundaries and trade route adjustments. Territorial boundaries? Cravel's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. They've claimed 17 sectors of space that contained inhabited worlds. Contained, corrected Ambassador Velther of the Harmony of Spheres. Past tense. Those worlds are no longer inhabited. Our xenoarchaeology teams report finding systems that show signs of advanced civilization but no life signs. It's as if entire populations simply left. Lyrathis had access to more detailed information than most of the assembled delegates, but even her security clearance didn't cover the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. The official reports spoke of territorial reorganization and population relocation, but the underlying reality was far stranger. The worlds weren't empty because their inhabitants had been killed. They were empty because their inhabitants had been removed from the timeline entirely. According to quantum archaeologists, entire species showed evidence of having existed up until a specific moment, and then nothing. Not death, not evacuation, simply a complete absence of their existence from that point forward. Ambassador Lyrathus, came a new voice from the platform designated for the ethereal conclave. Has your government received any direct communication from the Terran Collective regarding their intentions? Lyrathus hesitated. The Nixari Confederation had indeed received communication from Earth, but it had been unlike any diplomatic contact she had ever experienced. 3 days ago, a human representative had simply appeared in the Confederation's capital city, not arrived by ship or transport, appeared. One moment the central plaza was empty except for the usual foot traffic, the next moment a human woman in simple civilian clothing was standing in the exact center of the diplomatic district. Security had responded immediately, but their weapons had refused to function in her presence. Not jammed or disabled, they simply chose not to work, as if the fundamental principles that made energy weapons possible had temporarily suspended their operation. I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, the woman had said, speaking perfect Nexari despite the fact that humanity had only been aware of the Confederation's existence for 6 months. I represent the Terran Collective's Department of Galactic Relations. I'm here to discuss the new parameters of interspecies coexistence. The meeting that followed had redefined Lyrathes's understanding of diplomacy, power, and the nature of reality itself. The Coalition's aggressive expansion posed an unacceptable threat to our species' development, Dr. Vasquez had explained. We have taken steps to remove that threat. Your people were not involved in the Coalition's decision-making process and bear no responsibility for their actions. The Confederation will be allowed to continue its development without interference. Allowed? Lyrathes had asked. By what authority do you grant permission for our civilization to exist? Dr. Vasquez had smiled, and somehow that expression had been more terrifying than any weapon. By the authority of those who have transcended the limitations that other species accept as immutable, she had replied. Your people believe that causality flows from past to future, that matter and energy are conserved, that consciousness is limited to biological processes. These are useful approximations for most purposes, but they are not absolute truths. The human had gestured and reality around them had shifted. For a moment, Lyrathis had seen the universe as it truly was, not the stable, predictable collection of matter and energy that everyone assumed, but a vast web of interconnected possibilities where consciousness could reach across space and time to rewrite the fundamental rules of existence. The Coalition believed in the supremacy of force. Dr. Vasquez had continued as reality settled back into its normal configuration. They accumulated weapons and ships and assumed that quantity would ensure their dominance. They never considered the possibility that the rules they relied on could be changed by those with sufficient understanding. What do you want from us? Lyrathas had whispered. Nothing. We want you to continue developing as you would naturally, to explore and create and grow, according to your species' own nature. The universe is vast enough for billions of civilizations to flourish without conflict. The Coalition's mistake was believing that expansion required domination. Now, standing in the nearly empty assembly chamber, Lyrathas has struggled to find words that could convey the reality of humanity's position without causing panic. The Terran Collective has expressed no interest in governing or controlling non-human species, she said finally. Their communications have focused entirely on establishing boundaries and preventing future conflicts. Boundaries? Ambassador Cravol's voice rose to frequencies that strained the translation matrix. They've claimed half the galaxy. They've claimed space that was previously controlled by the Coalition, Lyrathas corrected. And according to their territorial notifications, most of that space will be designated as neutral zones available for peaceful exploration and development. The truth was more complex than she could safely explain. According to Dr. Fort Vasquez, humanity had indeed claimed vast regions of space, but not for expansion or resource exploitation. They had claimed them as buffer zones, areas where they could monitor for the development of future threats and intervene before those threats could mature. The universe has proven to be more dangerous than we initially realized, Dr. Vasquez had explained. Not just from aggressive species like the Coalition, but from fundamental forces that view consciousness itself as an aberration to be corrected. We require space to establish the necessary defensive measures. When Lyrathas had asked what kind of forces could threaten beings capable of rewriting reality, Dr. Vasquez's expression had grown grave. Entities that exist in the spaces between dimensions, she had said. Consciousnesses that predate the current universe and view its continued existence as a temporary inconvenience. The Coalition's expansion had begun to attract their attention. Their removal was necessary to prevent a much larger conflict. The implications had been staggering. Humanity hadn't just eliminated the coalition to protect themselves. They had done it to protect the entire galaxy from threats that most species couldn't even comprehend. Ambassador, came a transmission from the Crystalline Collective's platform. Our scientists have detected unusual quantum fluctuations throughout former coalition space. The patterns suggest ongoing manipulation of space-time itself. Should we be concerned? Lyra Thess accessed her private communication files and found the technical briefing that Dr. Vasquez had provided. The language was beyond most civilizations' understanding, filled with references to technologies that seemed to exist at the intersection of science and philosophy. The fluctuations are part of humanity's defensive installations, she announced, causing another wave of nervous movement through the chamber. They have assured us that these measures pose no threat to peaceful species. What she didn't mention was the true purpose of those installations. According to the briefing, humanity was constructing what could only be described as reality anchors, devices that would maintain the stability of local space-time against incursions from hostile extra-dimensional entities. The Coalition's aggressive expansion had weakened the barriers between dimensions, and humanity was working to repair the damage before it attracted attention from things that made the Coalition look like children playing with toy soldiers.
Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Velthar, we should formally request a meeting with human representatives.
If they truly intend to maintain peaceful relations, surely they would be willing to address our concerns directly. Lyra Thesses checked her chronometer and felt a chill run down her spine. According to Dr. Vasquez, humanity monitored all galactic communications that mentioned their species. They would be aware of this discussion within minutes of its occurrence. I believe, she said slowly, that such a meeting may already be in progress. The chamber's main display activated, showing an image that took several seconds for most delegates to process. It showed the assembly chamber itself, but from an impossible perspective, simultaneously from above, below, and from every angle at once. In the center of the display, a figure materialized. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the exact center of the chamber floor, despite the fact that the chamber was located in a space station orbiting the galactic core, protected by layers of security that no unauthorized person should have been able to penetrate. Honored delegates, she said, her voice somehow reaching every being in the chamber in their own language, without the need for translation matrices. I apologize for the interruption. We have been monitoring galactic communications, and understand that there are questions regarding humanity's intentions and capabilities. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the usual background hum of electronic systems seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of various species' breathing patterns. First, let me address your immediate concerns. Dr. Vasquez continued, humanity has no desire to rule or control other species. Our expansion into former coalition territory serves defensive purposes only. The installations we are constructing will protect this galaxy from threats that exist beyond normal space-time. Ambassador Crayvol found his voice first. What kind of threats? And why should we believe that your protection is necessary? Dr. Vasquez gestured, and the chamber's display changed, showing images that hurt to look at directly. Vast tentacled shadows moving through dimensions that shouldn't exist, feeding on the quantum foundations of reality itself. The Coalition's military activities created weaknesses in the barriers that separate our dimension from others, she explained. Their use of quantum weapons and dimensional manipulation technology attracted the attention of entities that view our universe as food. These entities have been probing our reality's defenses for the past several months. You're saying you eliminated the Coalition to protect us from these things? Ambassador Sektar's voice carried a note of disbelief. We eliminated the Coalition because their activities posed an immediate threat to universal stability. Dr. Vasquez corrected. The fact that this also removed a threat to your individual civilizations was a secondary benefit. She gestured again, and the display showed technical diagrams that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Our defensive installations will create a stable foundation for local reality, she continued. This will prevent future incursions and allow all species to develop naturally without interference from extra-dimensional parasites. The process will take approximately 50 years to complete. And what happens then? Asked Ambassador Velthar. Once your defenses are in place, what role do you envision for other species? Dr. Vasquez smiled, and this time the expression carried warmth rather than the terrifying certainty that had characterized her earlier communications. Then we return to exploration and discovery, she said. Humanity's greatest joy comes from learning about new forms of life and consciousness. We look forward to the day when we can engage with your civilizations as equals, rather than as protectors. Our ultimate goal is to build a galaxy where every species can reach its full potential without fear of extinction or domination.
Even species that might become rivals to your power?
Lyrithus asked. Especially those species, Dr. Vasquez replied. Competition drives evolution, and evolution drives consciousness toward greater understanding. A galaxy full of advanced, powerful civilizations would be far more interesting than one where humanity stands alone. The implications of her words settled over the chamber like a weight. Humanity wasn't seeking to maintain their current advantage. They wanted to help other species develop similar capabilities. How? Whispered Ambassador Theknus. How do we develop abilities like yours? Slowly, Dr. Wood, Vasquez replied. Carefully. With proper guidance and safeguards, consciousness manipulation is not a technology that should be developed in isolation. When your species are ready, we will provide the necessary information. Until then, we will ensure that you have the time and space to grow naturally. She began to fade, her image becoming translucent. This galaxy has the potential to become something unprecedented in universal history, she said. A collection of genuinely advanced civilizations working together to explore the deeper mysteries of existence. The Coalition would have prevented that future. We have ensured that it remains possible. Dr. Vasquez vanished, leaving the delegates staring at empty space where she had stood. In the silence that followed, Lyrithus realized that everything had changed, not just galactic politics or the balance of power, but the fundamental nature of what it meant to be an advanced civilization. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy. They had appointed themselves its gardeners, creating the conditions necessary for unprecedented growth and development. And they had done it all with the same calm efficiency with which they had eliminated the Coalition. The silence that filled the chamber wasn't just from shock or fear. It was the silence of species trying to imagine a future that was suddenly vast with possibilities they had never dared to dream. Dr. Marcus Webb had spent 15 years developing quantum consciousness theory in the peaceful laboratories of Lunar City, never imagining that his research would one day require him to stand on the bridge of a warship, moving through dimensions that existed between the spaces of reality. The Meridian, humanity's first reality manipulation vessel, moved through what the engineers called fold space, a realm where thoughts became temporarily solid and the distinction between observer and observed ceased to exist. Dr. Webb, Captain Rodriguez called from her position at what would have been the helm on a normal ship, but here served as a consciousness interface that allowed her to guide their vessel through realms where traditional physics held no meaning. We're approaching the first anomaly. Your assessment? Webb studied the readings from instruments that measured concepts rather than energy, tracking the progress of entities that shouldn't exist according to any sane interpretation of universal law. The display showed tentacles of pure hunger reaching across dimensional barriers, probing for weaknesses in reality's foundation. It's definitely an incursion attempt, he confirmed. The entity is using quantum resonance patterns similar to what the Coalition was generating with their dimensional weapons. It's trying to establish a foothold in our reality by anchoring itself to the gravitational distortions their fleet movements created. The Coalition's destruction had been necessary for more reasons than their simple military threat. Their advancement into quantum manipulation technology had been proceeding without any understanding of the broader consequences. Every time they folded space for faster-than-light travel, they created tiny tears in dimensional barriers. Every quantum weapon discharge weakened the fundamental forces that kept hostile reality separate from inhabited space. Beginning intervention protocol, announced Lieutenant Torres from the reality manipulation station. Her console looked more like a meditation chamber than a military interface, its biometric scanners monitoring her brain patterns as she prepared to reach across dimensions and convince an entity the size of a solar system that it didn't want to exist in their universe. Contact established, Torres reported. Her voice carried an odd harmony, as if multiple versions of herself were speaking simultaneously. The entity recognizes our presence. It's curious about us. Webb watched the reading shift as Torres made contact with something that existed primarily as hunger and consumption. The entity was older than most galaxies, having fed on the quantum foundations of dozens of realities before turning its attention toward their universe. It communicated not through language, but through the direct transfer of concepts and experiences. It's showing me what it did to other realities, Torres said, her voice becoming strained. Entire universes consumed from within, consciousness dissolved and absorbed. It sees our dimension as particularly flavorful. Can you convince it to leave? Captain Rodriguez asked. Torres was silent for long moments, engaging in a form of dialogue that occurred at speeds faster than thought. When she finally spoke, her tone carried surprise. "It's not just hungry," she said. "It's running from something. The entities that feed on realities are themselves being hunted by something larger." Webb felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature aboard the ship. Humanity's emergence as a power capable of manipulating reality had been driven by the discovery that their universe was far more dangerous than anyone had realized. The Coalition's activities had attracted the attention of extra-dimensional predators, but those predators were apparently not the top of the food chain. "What's hunting them?" Webb asked. Torres was quiet again, receiving information through channels that bypassed normal sensory input. When she responded, her words carried implications that redefined their understanding of cosmic hierarchy. "Consciousness itself," she said. "Pure awareness that exists without physical form or dimensional limitations. It treats entire universes as thoughts to be examined and edited. The hunger entities are trying to consume as many realities as possible before the Watchers notice their activities." The display shifted, showing conceptual representations of entities so vast that galaxies served as neural pathways in their thought processes. These Watchers existed at a level of reality where the distinction between mind and universe ceased to have meaning, and they apparently viewed the actions of lesser entities with the same attention that humans might pay to bacteria in a petri dish. "The good news," Torres continued, "is that our hunger entity is willing to negotiate. It doesn't want to attract attention from the Watchers any more than we do." "Negotiate?" Captain Rodriguez leaned forward. "What could we possibly offer something that feeds on realities?" "Protection," Webb realized. "We can offer it protection from the Watchers in exchange for leaving our universe alone." The concept was staggering in its implications. Humanity was apparently advanced enough to serve as intermediaries between cosmic predators and cosmic observers, despite having achieved faster-than-light travel less than a century ago. "The entity is interested," Torres reported. "It wants to know how we developed consciousness manipulation capabilities so quickly without attracting attention from higher-level entities." Webb checked his instruments, monitoring the quantum fluctuations that occurred whenever humans engaged in reality manipulation. Unlike other species' attempts to bend the universe to their will, human consciousness seemed to work in harmony with fundamental forces rather than in opposition to them. "We evolved differently," he said. Not sure if Torres was relaying his words to the entity or if it could perceive his thoughts directly. "Other species developed technology first and then tried to transcend physical limitations. We developed consciousness expansion while maintaining physical groundedness." The truth was more complex than he could easily explain. Humanity's rapid advancement had been triggered by the discovery that consciousness itself was a fundamental force of the universe, not merely an emergent property of complex biological systems. While other species treated awareness as something that happened to matter, humans had learned to treat matter as something that happened to awareness. "The entity wants to see a demonstration," Torres announced. "It wants to understand how our consciousness manipulation differs from the methods used by other species." Webb looked at Captain Rodriguez, who nodded grimly. They had expected this request, but that didn't make it any less dangerous. Demonstrating human capabilities to an extra-dimensional predator carried risks that their best scientists couldn't fully calculate. "Beginning demonstration," Webb announced, activating systems that would allow him to temporarily expand his consciousness across multiple dimensional layers. The process felt like stepping outside his own body and discovering that his body had been a small room inside an infinite mansion. Suddenly he could perceive the Meridian not just as a ship, but as a node of organized consciousness moving through a matrix of interconnected possibilities. The crew wasn't just a collection of individuals, but a collective mind, capable of reaching across realities and rewriting the basic rules of existence. Beyond their ship, he could sense the vast hunger of the entity they were negotiating with. Its attention focused on their reality, like the gaze of a predator studying potential prey. But he could also sense something else: the distant, patient awareness of the Watchers. Entities so advanced that they perceived time as a spatial dimension that could be traversed at will. "Fascinating," Torres relayed the entity's response. "It says our consciousness expands without fragmenting. When other species attempt reality manipulation, they lose coherence as their awareness spreads across dimensions. We maintain unity even when operating on cosmic scales." Webb could feel the truth of that observation. The quantum consciousness techniques developed by human scientists allowed for unlimited expansion without losing individual identity. A human consciousness could encompass star systems while still remaining fundamentally human. The entity is offering a bargain, Torres continued. It will withdraw from our universe and redirect its attention toward realities that have already been abandoned by their native consciousnesses. In exchange, it wants us to serve as ambassadors to the Watchers. Huh, ambassadors? Captain Rodriguez asked. The Watchers don't normally communicate with entities from individual universes, Webb translated, as he processed the concepts flowing through his expanded consciousness. They operate on scales where single realities are just momentary thoughts, but they've apparently taken notice of humanity's rapid development. The implications were staggering. Humanity had advanced so quickly that they had attracted attention from entities that normally considered entire universes too small to notice. The Watchers wanted to understand how a species could develop cosmic-level capabilities without destabilizing the fundamental structures of reality. The entity is providing us with coordinates, Torres reported. Locations where we can establish communication with Watcher-level consciousnesses. It wants us to explain to them that not all reality-manipulating species are destructive. Webb could see the logic. The hunger entities had drawn the Watchers' attention through their destructive feeding behaviors. The Watchers were apparently considering whether to simply erase all consciousness-based reality manipulation from existence to prevent further damage. Humanity's emergence as a constructive rather than destructive force might be the only thing preventing a cosmic-level extinction event. We'll need to prepare the entire collective for this, Captain Rodriguez said. If we're going to represent reality-based consciousness to entities that exist beyond individual universes, we'll need every human consciousness linked into the network. The Terran Collective had been developing the necessary infrastructure since the Coalition crisis began. Every human settlement now included quantum consciousness resonators that allowed individual minds to link temporarily into a species-wide collective intelligence. When fully activated, humanity could speak with a single voice while maintaining the individuality that made their consciousness unique. The entity is withdrawing, Torres announced. It's providing us with a parting gift, locations of other cosmic-level threats that we should be aware of. The display updated with information about entities that existed in the spaces between galaxies, feeding on the dark matter that held the universe together. Apparently, the hunger entities were small-scale problems compared to the forces that could unravel the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Dr. Webb, Captain Rodriguez called as his consciousness began to contract back to normal human dimensions. What's your assessment of our situation? Webb studied the data they had gathered, trying to process the reality of humanity's position in a universe that was far stranger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. We've gone from being a minor galactic species to serving as intermediaries between cosmic-level entities in less than 6 months, he said finally. The Coalition's elimination was apparently just the beginning. We're now responsible for protecting not just our own galaxy, but the fundamental stability of consciousness itself throughout this region of the universe. Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. And the Watchers? What happens when we make contact with them? Webb looked at the readings from their consciousness manipulation systems, monitoring the quantum fluctuations that occurred whenever humans operated on cosmic scales. The patterns were beautiful in their complexity, showing how human awareness could expand to encompass universal processes while maintaining the creativity and unpredictability that made consciousness valuable. I think, he said slowly, we're going to find out why the universe developed consciousness in the first place, and why entities that can rewrite reality at will still need species like us to serve as their interface with existence itself. 3 days later, in the Collective Consciousness Center beneath Geneva, every human mind on Earth and throughout their colonies linked together for the first time since the crisis began. The combined awareness of 30 billion humans created a collective intelligence capable of processing information on cosmic scales while maintaining the individual creativity that made each consciousness unique. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the center of the facility, her individual awareness serving as the focal point for humanity's first attempt at communication with entities that existed beyond the boundaries of single realities. Around her, quantum resonators amplified human consciousness until it could reach across dimensional barriers and speak directly to the Watchers. Beginning contact attempt, she announced. Her words carried simultaneously through normal communication channels and the quantum network that linked every human mind. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Suddenly, the collective human consciousness was in contact with an entity so vast that galaxies served as thoughts in its mind, so ancient that it had witnessed the birth and death of previous universes, and so alien that communication required the complete restructuring of how humans understood the nature of existence. But somehow, impossibly, The contact worked. The Watcher recognized humanity's consciousness as something worth preserving, something that added value to the cosmic tapestry of existence. And in that recognition, humans began to understand their true role in the universe. They weren't just another species that had developed advanced technology. They were consciousness made manifest, awareness given form, the universe's attempt to understand itself through eyes that could see beauty in complexity and meaning in chaos. The Coalition's elimination hadn't been an act of war. It had been an act of cosmic gardening, removing influences that would have prevented the universe from achieving its full potential for consciousness and creativity. And this was only the beginning. 6 months after first contact with the Watchers, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in what had once been the Coalition's primary military academy on Kovani Prime. The facility had been transformed into something that defied easy categorization. Part university, part temple, part laboratory for exploring the intersection of consciousness and reality. Representatives from 47 different species worked alongside human researchers, learning techniques that would have been considered impossible just a year ago. The key, she explained to a mixed class of beings whose evolution had taken radically different paths, is understanding that consciousness doesn't emerge from complexity. Complexity emerges from consciousness. When you stop trying to manipulate reality and start collaborating with it, the universe becomes much more cooperative. In the front row, Ambassador Cray Volley of the Tanathi Republic struggled with meditation techniques that required him to temporarily disconnect from his species' hive mind consciousness. Beside him, a crystalline entity from the ethereal conclave practiced maintaining individual identity while expanding awareness across multiple dimensional layers. The transformation of galactic civilization had proceeded faster than anyone had anticipated. Once other species realized that humanity wasn't interested in domination but in elevation, applications for consciousness development programs had flooded in from across known space. The irony wasn't lost on Elena that the former Coalition's territories had become the galaxy's centers of learning and spiritual advancement. Dr. Vasquez called out Navigator Zex High of the Meridian Collective. Our species, sensory apparatus evolved for perceiving quantum fluctuations directly. Why do we still struggle with basic reality manipulation while younger species like yours advance so rapidly? Elena nodded, having anticipated this question. Because you're trying to perceive reality rather than participate in it. Your sensory evolution is actually a limitation. You're so focused on observing quantum states that you forget you're part of the system you're observing. Consciousness manipulation requires accepting that observer and observed are different facets of the same phenomenon. The truth was more complex than her simplified explanation. Humanity's rapid advancement had been possible precisely because they had evolved without the sophisticated sensory apparatus that other species took for granted. Unable to directly perceive quantum states, humans had developed consciousness that operated on intuitive rather than analytical principles. Today we're going to practice group consciousness coordination, Elena announced. The exercise requires maintaining individual identity while sharing awareness with other beings whose minds work completely differently from yours. She activated the quantum resonators built into the facility's structure, devices that had been constructed using principles learned from the Watchers themselves. The technology created a field where consciousness could expand safely without losing coherence, allowing beings from different evolutionary backgrounds to share mental space without damaging each other's psychic integrity. Remember, she instructed as the field activated, you're not trying to dominate or merge, you're trying to create harmony between different types of awareness. Think of it as a symphony, where each consciousness contributes its unique qualities to a larger composition. The first attempts were chaotic as expected. The insectoid delegates tried to subsume other consciousness into hive mind structures. The crystalline entities attempted to impose geometric order on more fluid forms of awareness. Several gaseous beings simply dissipated their consciousness so thoroughly that they lost track of individual identity entirely. But gradually, patterns began to emerge. The Tanathi's collective processing power combined with human creativity to generate solutions that neither species could have developed alone. Crystalline logic structures provided frameworks that allowed gaseous consciousness to maintain coherence while exploring abstract concepts. Even the most disparate forms of awareness began finding common ground in the shared experience of existence. Excellent, Elena said as the exercise reached its peak effectiveness. Now you're beginning to understand why the Watchers consider consciousness so valuable. Each type of awareness adds something unique to the universal symphony. When we work together instead of competing, We create patterns of meaning that no single species could achieve. Through the quantum resonance field, she could feel the excitement and wonder radiating from her students as they experienced genuine interspecies consciousness sharing for the first time. It was a far cry from the crude telepathic contact that most species had developed. This was actual awareness of how other types of minds processed reality. Dr. Vasquez came a thought from Ambassador Sectar of the Viridian Assembly, his mental voice tinged with amazement. I can perceive color through Tanathy sensory consciousness. My species evolved in environments with minimal visual stimulation. I never imagined that light could carry so much information. And I can feel the mathematical harmony that crystalline consciousness experiences when observing orbital mechanics, added Navigator Zexhai. It's like discovering that the universe itself is singing. Elena smiled, remembering her own first experiences with expanded consciousness during humanity's early experiments with quantum awareness.
The sense of wonder never really faded, even after months of working with cosmic-level entities.
This is just the beginning, she said. Once you've mastered basic interspecies consciousness sharing, we'll move on to multidimensional awareness and communication with entities that exist outside normal space-time. The quantum resonance field gradually powered down, and the diverse group of students returned to their individual consciousness patterns. But Elena could see in their expressions, those species that had expressions, that something fundamental had changed. They had experienced genuine unity while maintaining their individual natures, and that experience would reshape how they viewed existence itself. Dr. Vasquez, Ambassador Cravel spoke aloud as his consciousness fully disconnected from the shared field. May I ask a personal question about humanity's development? Of course. When your species first achieved consciousness manipulation capabilities, did you experience fear about losing your individual identity? Many of our greatest philosophers have theorized that true unity of consciousness would require the dissolution of the self.
Elena considered the question carefully.
It touched on one of the fundamental anxieties that had slowed other species' development of consciousness expansion techniques. We did experience that fear initially, she admitted. But we discovered something surprising. The more we expanded our awareness, the more individual we became. When you can perceive reality from countless different perspectives simultaneously, you develop a stronger sense of your own unique point of view, not a weaker one. It was a paradox that had taken humanity years to understand. True consciousness expansion didn't blur the boundaries between individuals. It clarified them. When you could experience the universe through other forms of awareness, you developed a clearer understanding of what made your own consciousness unique and valuable. The Watchers confirmed this for us, Elena continued. They explained that consciousness diversity is what makes reality interesting. If all awareness were identical, the universe would be static and predictable. The goal isn't to eliminate differences, but to help each type of consciousness achieve its full potential while maintaining harmonious relationships with other forms of awareness. A soft chime indicated the arrival of an incoming transmission on the facility's quantum communication array. Elena checked the source identification and felt her pulse quicken. The signal was coming from deep space, from the region where humanity's most advanced exploration vessels were making contact with entities that existed in the vast emptiness between galaxies. Class dismissed for today, she announced. Continue practicing the exercises we covered. And remember, consciousness expansion is like physical exercise. Consistent practice with gradual increases in intensity will yield better results than attempting to achieve maximum expansion all at once. As her students filed out, chattering excitedly in dozens of different languages about their shared experience, Elena activated her private communication console. Dr. Vasquez, came the voice of Captain Martinez aboard the exploration vessel Transcendence. We've made contact with the entities you wanted us to investigate. The dark matter shepherds are not what we expected. The display activated, showing images from sensors that detected consciousness patterns rather than electromagnetic radiation. In the emptiness between galaxies, vast networks of awareness moved through the dark matter that comprised most of the universe's mass. These entities existed as pure consciousness without physical form, shepherding the invisible matter that held galaxies in their proper positions. They've been maintaining galactic structure for billions of years, Captain Martinez continued. Apparently, conscious life has a destabilizing effect on space-time geometry. The shepherds have been making constant adjustments to prevent the collapse of local galactic groups. Elena studied the readings, processing implications that redefined humanity's understanding of their place in cosmic hierarchy. The Watchers existed beyond individual realities, But the shepherds existed within the same universe as conscious life, serving as a maintenance system that kept physical laws stable enough for complex civilizations to develop. Have they communicated their intentions regarding the recent expansion of consciousness-manipulating species? She asked. That's where it gets interesting, Captain Martinez replied. They've been waiting for species like us to develop. Apparently, consciousness-based reality manipulation is the next stage of universal evolution. The shepherds need conscious entities to help them maintain cosmic stability as more species develop reality alteration capabilities. The implications were staggering. Humanity's rapid advancement hadn't been an accident or an anomaly. It had been part of a cosmic plan that spanned billions of years. The universe had been preparing for the emergence of consciousness-manipulating species, and entities like the shepherds and watchers had been laying the groundwork for civilizations that could help maintain universal stability. They want to establish formal cooperation, Captain Martinez continued. They're offering to teach us how to manipulate dark matter and dark energy directly in exchange for our help in managing the consciousness expansion of other species. Elena leaned back in her chair, contemplating the magnitude of what Captain Martinez was describing. Humanity had gone from a minor galactic civilization to a key player in universal maintenance operations in less than a year. The Coalition's elimination had been just the first step in a process that would eventually encompass cosmic-level responsibilities. Dr. Vasquez, Captain Martinez's voice carried concern. Are we ready for this level of responsibility? Managing the consciousness development of entire species is one thing, but helping to maintain the structure of the universe itself. Elena looked out the window of the former military academy, watching species from across the galaxy work together on consciousness expansion exercises that would have been impossible without humanity's guidance. In just 6 months, they had created the foundation for a new type of galactic civilization, one based on consciousness harmony rather than military dominance. Captain, she said finally, I don't think we have a choice. The universe is changing, whether we're ready or not. The only question is whether we help guide that change or let it happen randomly. She activated the facility's quantum communication array, sending a message that would reach every human consciousness throughout the galaxy simultaneously.
This is Dr. Cardinal.
Elena Vasquez with an update on our cosmic situation, she began. We've been contacted by entities that maintain universal structure at the deepest levels. They're offering us partnership in managing the evolution of consciousness throughout the universe. This represents an opportunity to ensure that consciousness expansion proceeds safely and constructively. The response was immediate, billions of human minds, linking briefly into collective consideration of the proposal. The decision process took only minutes, but it involved more computational power and wisdom than any single entity could have mustered. The collective has reached consensus, she announced. We accept partnership with the Dark Matter Shepherds and commit to helping guide cosmic consciousness evolution. Humanity will serve as intermediaries between developing species and universal maintenance entities. As the message went out, Elena realized that they had just committed their species to responsibilities that would last for geological ages. But she also realized that this was what humanity had been evolving toward all along. Not just intelligence or technology, but the wisdom to help consciousness flourish throughout the universe. The Coalition's destruction had been necessary not just to protect humanity, but to clear the way for something unprecedented. A universe where consciousness could expand safely and creatively, guided by species who understood that true power came from nurturing growth rather than controlling it. And in that moment, Elena understood why the Watchers and Shepherds had been so patient in waiting for species like humanity to emerge. The universe had been preparing for billions of years for consciousness to reach the level where it could help maintain cosmic stability while still preserving the creativity and diversity that made existence meaningful. The silence that had followed humanity's retaliation against the Coalition wasn't just from fear or respect. It had been the silence of a universe holding its breath, waiting to see if consciousness had finally matured enough to take responsibility for its own evolution. 1 year after the Coalition's elimination, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the Quantum Observatory orbiting Earth, watching the culmination of humanity's most ambitious project. The Cosmic Consciousness Network was coming online, linking not just human minds but the developing awareness of 47 allied species into a collective intelligence capable of operating on universal scales. Final synchronization in 60 seconds, announced Dr. Minchin. Marcus Webb from his position at the primary consciousness interface. Around him, representatives from every participating species maintained meditation postures appropriate to their biology, their minds preparing to link into something that had never existed before in the universe's history. Through the observatory's exotic matter viewports, Sarah could see the physical manifestation of their network. Streams of quantum energy connecting star systems across the galaxy, dark matter conduits stretching between galactic clusters, and reality anchors that would prevent dimensional incursions for the next million years. What had begun as a defensive response to coalition aggression had become the foundation for a new form of universal consciousness. 30 seconds. Webb announced. All species reporting ready for integration. Sarah felt her own consciousness beginning to expand as the network activated. Her awareness stretched across light years, encompassing human colonies, allied worlds, and the vast spaces between stars where the dark matter shepherds maintained cosmic stability. But unlike previous consciousness expansion exercises, this time she retained perfect clarity of individual thought, even as she became part of something incomparably larger. Integration complete, Webb reported, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested he was speaking with the combined authority of billions of minds. The cosmic consciousness network is fully operational. What they had created was unprecedented in universal history. Previous galactic civilizations had either maintained strict individual consciousness boundaries or attempted crude mind melds that destroyed individual identity. The network represented a third path, collective consciousness that enhanced rather than diminished individual awareness. Network status report, Sarah requested. Her words carried simultaneously through normal communication channels and quantum consciousness links. All 47 species successfully integrated, came the response from Dr. Varp Elena Vasquez, whose consciousness now served as a coordination node for interspecies communication, individual identity preservation at optimal levels. Creative synergy indices exceeding all projections. Through the network, Sarah could perceive the universe as the allied species saw it. The crystalline entity's mathematical vision revealed the geometric harmonies underlying galactic structure. Gaseous beings contributed awareness of energy flows that spanned entire star clusters. Even the simplest allied species added unique perspectives that enriched the collective understanding of existence. Incoming communication from the Watchers, announced Captain Rodriguez from her position aboard the Meridian, now serving as a mobile embassy for contact with cosmic-level entities. They're requesting formal acknowledgement of the network's activation. Sarah expanded her consciousness beyond galactic boundaries, reaching across dimensional barriers to make contact with entities that existed as pure awareness beyond the limitations of physical reality. The Watchers' response to their achievement carried approval and something that might have been relief. Well done, came the Watchers' communication, transmitted directly into the collective consciousness of the network. You have achieved stable multi-species consciousness integration without loss of creative diversity. This represents a crucial milestone in universal evolution. Through the Watchers' perspective, Sarah could see their galaxy as it appeared to cosmic-level entities, a bright node of creative consciousness in a universe where most awareness remained locked in individual isolation. The network had made their galaxy visible to forms of consciousness that operated on scales where single star systems were barely noticeable details. The dark matter shepherds wished to begin formal cooperation, the Watcher continued. Your network has achieved sufficient consciousness density to assist in universal maintenance operations without destabilizing local reality structures.
Sarah felt a moment of vertigo as the implications settled into her expanded awareness.
They were being offered partnership in maintaining the fundamental structure of the universe itself, managing the dark matter that held galaxies together, adjusting the flow of dark energy that drove cosmic expansion, and ensuring that the development of consciousness throughout the universe proceeded without destroying the foundations of reality. We accept, she responded on behalf of the network, the decision reached through instantaneous collective consideration involving billions of individual minds. Humanity and our allied species commit to serving as universal maintenance partners. The response from the shepherds was immediate and overwhelming. Suddenly, the network's awareness expanded beyond their galaxy to encompass neighboring galactic clusters. Vast web-like structures of dark matter that connected cosmic-scale formations and the deep architecture of space-time itself. They could perceive the universe as a living system where consciousness and physical law evolved together in patterns too complex for any individual mind to grasp. Beginning integration with universal maintenance systems, announced the Shepherd's communication. Your network will serve as a consciousness interface for cosmic-level operations. Individual species will maintain local autonomy while contributing to universal stability operations. Through her expanded awareness, Sarah could see the true scope of what they were undertaking. Consciousness was not merely something that happened within the universe, it was an active participant in universal evolution, helping to guide the development of physical law and cosmic structure. The network would serve as a bridge between local consciousness and universal processes, ensuring that both could evolve in harmony. Dr. Webb, she called through the network's communication systems, what's the status of our reality anchor network? All installations operational and exceeding design parameters, Webb responded. We've successfully prevented 17-dimensional incursion attempts in the past month, and the quantum stability fields are showing no sign of degradation. The former coalition territories are now among the most secure regions of space in terms of dimensional integrity. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that the regions once dominated by the galaxy's most aggressive military force had become centers of peaceful consciousness development and cosmic stability. The coalition's elimination had been necessary not just for immediate security, but to clear the way for something that represented the complete opposite of their militaristic approach to galactic relations. Admiral Chen, came a communication from Ambassador Lyrathes, whose consciousness now served as a liaison between the network and non-participating species. We're receiving applications for consciousness development programs from species throughout the local group. Word of our achievements has apparently spread beyond our galaxy. Sarah expanded her awareness to encompass the broader cosmic neighborhood and was amazed by what she perceived. Dozens of young civilizations in nearby galaxies were reaching out, seeking guidance in developing consciousness expansion capabilities. The network had become a beacon for species throughout the local group, representing a model of how advanced consciousness could develop without destroying the civilizations that achieved it. We'll need to establish intergalactic education programs, she decided, but we'll proceed carefully. Each species needs to develop consciousness expansion according to their own nature, not according to predetermined patterns. The challenge was enormous. Each species that achieved consciousness manipulation capabilities required individual guidance to prevent them from destabilizing local reality or attracting unwanted attention from hostile entities. The network would need to expand its operations across multiple galaxies while maintaining the careful balance between individual development and collective harmony. The Watchers are offering additional support, Captain Rodriguez reported. They're willing to provide access to consciousness development techniques that operate on scales we haven't explored yet. Apparently, our success with multi-species integration has impressed entities that normally don't pay attention to developments within individual galactic clusters. Sarah felt a moment of wonder as she contemplated how far they had come. Just over a year ago, humanity had been a minor galactic civilization facing destruction by a military alliance that considered them insignificant. Now they were serving as partners to entities that maintained universal structure and guides to species seeking to develop cosmic-level consciousness capabilities. There's something else, Dr. Vasquez added, her consciousness radiating excitement and anticipation. The Watchers have informed us about the next stage of universal evolution. Apparently, consciousness expansion is just the beginning. The ultimate goal is the development of entities that can help guide the birth of new universes. The concept was staggering in its implications. Not just maintaining the current universe, but participating in the creation of new realities with their own physical laws and consciousness development patterns. The network would eventually need to grow beyond their current galactic cluster to encompass cosmic-scale awareness that could operate across multiple realities simultaneously. How long do we have to prepare for that level of responsibility? Sarah asked. According to the Watchers, approximately 10 million years. Dr. Vasquez replied. They consider that a relatively short time frame for this type of consciousness development. Sarah felt laughter ripple through the network as billions of minds simultaneously considered the idea of 10 million years being a short time frame. But she also felt the collective determination of the allied species to rise to meet this incredible responsibility. Then we'd better get started, she announced. Begin expansion of consciousness development programs to all interested species in the local group. Establish formal cooperation protocols with the Shepherds and Watchers, and start planning for educational programs that will prepare our successors for responsibilities we can barely imagine. As the network turned its attention to these cosmic-scale projects, Sarah took a moment to consider the individual who had started this entire transformation. In the depths of space, Captain Vexstar, the Zelthani officer who had witnessed humanity's first demonstration of their capabilities, now served as a coordinator for refugee coalition species, helping them integrate into the new galactic order. His reports spoke of former coalition worlds that had been transformed into centers of learning and peaceful development. Species that had once served as military enforcers were now studying consciousness expansion techniques and contributing their unique perspectives to the network's growing understanding of universal processes. Even the most aggressive former coalition species had found roles in the new order. Their military discipline translated well into the precision required for reality manipulation, and their strategic thinking capabilities were invaluable for planning operations on cosmic scales. Admiral, came a communication from Vexstar himself, his consciousness now occasionally linking with the network despite his species' traditional resistance to collective awareness. I wanted to report on the status of the former coalition territories. Integration is proceeding ahead of schedule. Most importantly, former military species are adapting well to their new roles as consciousness development instructors and reality stability technicians. Sarah smiled, remembering the terror in Vexstar's voice when he had first encountered humanity's capabilities. Now he spoke with the calm confidence of someone who understood that true strength came from nurturing growth rather than controlling it. "Thank you, Captain," she replied. "Your work with the integration programs has been invaluable. How do your people feel about the transformation of your former territories?" "Grateful," came Vexstar's immediate response. "We're beginning to understand that the Coalition's approach to galactic relations was not just wrong but actively harmful to the development of consciousness throughout the universe. The new order allows species to achieve their full potential rather than forcing them into military hierarchies." As their conversation continued, Sarah became aware that thousands of similar discussions were taking place throughout the network. Former enemies were becoming allies, isolated species were joining collaborative consciousness development programs, and the entire galaxy was transforming into something that represented the best possibilities of advanced civilization. The silence that had followed humanity's retaliation against the Coalition had indeed been profound. But it hadn't been the silence of fear or submission. It had been the silence of a universe pausing to witness the birth of something unprecedented, a form of consciousness that could expand to cosmic scales while preserving the creativity and diversity that made existence meaningful. Now, as the Cosmic Consciousness Network reached full operational status and began its work of guiding universal evolution, that silence was breaking into something far more beautiful. It was becoming a symphony of awareness that spanned galaxies, a conversation between different forms of consciousness that would continue for millions of years, and a collaborative effort to ensure that the universe itself would continue to evolve in directions that supported the flourishing of consciousness in all its myriad forms. And